everybody. Welcome to the beginning of the end, the last unit for anatomy. It was a close one. The reproductive system won out by 1 vote. So, we are going to learn about the reproductive system. I really enjoy this unit. It's super interesting and it's also super important. So happy that this gets to be our last unit. Yeah, I hope that you guys are all well. I miss you all so much. I am bummed that we are not going to get to have an in-person graduation, but you know, it's what's safe for everyone. So we got to make sure that we're keeping each other safe and that we are taking care of one another. Yeah, so reproductive system, we are going to talk about oogenesis and spermatogenesis. And these are some of those words that if we're in class, I'm going to make you all say them, right? So oogenesis, it's a great word. We're going to talk about the difference between diploid and haploid cells. We're going to talk about the hormones of the gonads. We're also going to talk about like just reproductive anatomy and how these hormones regulate your reproductive health. We're going to talk about what happens during the menstrual cycle and how those hormones that are important there are how they fluctuate and what that like maybe makes you feel. We're also going to talk about the differences between different like developmental stages. So the difference between a zygote, a morula, I always say that wrong, always have a hard time, and a blastocyst. We're going to talk about what happens with implantation and yeah, how babies grow. So it's going to be a great unit. It's going to be a lot packed in. Today we're going to do reproductive anatomy, and we're going to touch on spermatogenesis and oogenesis. We're going to spend more time next class talking about spermatogenesis and oogenesis. Okay, so, before we get started, do know that this unit has diagrams of male and female reproductive anatomy, so just like prepare yourselves, it is coming. Yeah, I mean, they're all very much science diagrams, so just so you know what's in here. Okay, so males and females both produce, store, and deliver gametes. And despite their external differences, both sexes share the following similarities. There's a pair of gonads, the organs that produce gametes, a system of ducts that store and deliver gametes. This is going to be really fun because in person you can kind of hear me say duct instead of ducks, but ducts with a T. And then structures that facilitate copulation or intercourse. I do want to take a moment and just like point out that I'm talking about biological sex here. I'm not talking about gender. And also that this stuff is determined by your chromosomes, but sometimes things get sometimes things get wonky with chromosomes, and you can end up having 3 sex chromosomes, and like biological sex is not black and white. So just wanted to give that blanket disclaimer before we get into it. Okay, so for both, like we just said, you have paired gonads. In the male, you have testes, and then in the female, you have ovaries. So remember, male is XY, female is XX. And that's on your chromosomes. Both of them produce gametes during meiosis. The male produces sperm through spermatogenesis, and the female produces eggs through oogenesis. They both have internal ducts and structural compatibility. So they both have unique anatomical features. So there are differences, but it's like off of one body plan, if that makes sense. Okay, male reproductive anatomy. So we're going to start with where sperm are made, and then we're going to work our way out of the body. So the male gonad is a testis, or the pair is called testes, and the sperm form here in the seminiferous tubules. And that process of the sperm forming is called spermatogenesis. Next up, we have the scrotum, which is an external sac that holds the testes and keeps them at a slightly cooler temperature than the body. This is to make sure that those sperm develop properly, and in order for them to be viable, they actually have to be a little bit cooler than body temperature. So they are stored outside of the body. When the sperm are mature, they move through the epididymis, which is kind of hard to see here, but it's at the top of the testes, and it loops here, so that's the epididymis, and it receives maturing sperm from the testes, and then when it's time to release sperm, they move through the vas deferens, it's this tube here. The vas deferens is what is cut when you have a vasectomy. So the vas deferens carries sperm to the urethra. The urethra, as we move our way down through the reproductive tract, runs the length of the penis. The urethra, note, it receives input both from like the vas deferens and also from the ureters. So the urethra is like a one-way exit for both sperm and for urine in the male. And then, last but not least, we have the penis, which contains erectile tissue that, when filled with blood, produces an erection. So that is like the male reproductive organ. Okay. You can pause this and get all of those parts written down, or these slides are up, so you can just check it out on the PDF. Okay, moving on to the female reproductive anatomy. We're going to do the same thing, starting inside out, so starting at the location of oogenesis. So that is the ovary. It is the female gonad where eggs are produced and released. And once those eggs mature, they will, and you're putting out about one egg a month, typically. That egg will be released and it will move through the oviduct. It's also known as the fallopian tube. So if you ever hear about somebody getting like their tubes tied, they go in and they interfere with those fallopian tubes. And that is usually the site where the egg meets the sperm. And the egg will then continue its journey down into the uterus, which is the site of pregnancy where an embryo develops into a baby. It's lined with your endometrium, and the opening at the bottom of your uterus is called a cervix. So once that egg gets fertilized in the oviduct, it will move into the uterus and then implant into the uterus. And that endometrium is there to be a nurturing source of nutrients for that embryo so the embryo can grow and develop. If the egg is unfertilized and it makes its way into the uterus and is then expelled from the body, your body can tell because you don't have certain hormonal changes and your endometrium sheds, and that's what a period is. Sometimes the sperm and egg can be fertilized in the oviduct, and then that egg can implant in the oviduct, and that's called an ectopic pregnancy, and those are usually not viable, or they're not viable. So that can be a very dangerous situation for the female if that happens. Okay, after the uterus, cervix, you have the vagina or the birth canal. This is where sperm enters during sex and a baby exits during birth. Different from the male here, okay? So the male, we said, penis has urethra that does sperm and urine. Female has vagina that does, fertilization, And then female has a urethra here that's connected to bladder that has nothing to do with fertilization. Okay, so in the male, it's like one exit. In the female, you have two. Then you have, the last but not least, the vulva, which is the name of all of the external female reproductive structures, such as the clitoris and labia. Yeah. So once again, you can pause this, get all of these reproductive anatomy things written down. And okay, so unique anatomical features just in list form, right? So in the male, you see testes, scrotum, penis, epididymis, vas deferens, your urethra, and then later we're going to talk about seminal vesicles and the prostate. And then in females, you have ovaries, oviducts, also known as your fallopian tube, uterus, endometrium, cervix, vulva. And we seem to be missing the vagina on the female there. Oops. Sorry, guys. Okay, so a little bit about spermatogenesis and oogenesis, but we're going to cover this more in depth next time. So sperm is a haploid cell formed from the division of a diploid cell. So remember all the way back to biology, diploid means two sets of chromosomes, haploid means one set of chromosomes. So sperm is one set of chromosomes in the cell. It's formed by the division of a cell that has two sets of chromosomes. And that process is meiosis, right? So within the testes, diploid cells divide via meiosis to produce haploid sperm cells that have 23 chromosomes. This process is called spermatogenesis. Remember, meiosis has two stages. You have meiosis 1, meiosis 2. Sperm is really just like a DNA packet with some, with a tail and some energy. Okay, eggs, on the other hand, or ova, is also a haploid cell formed by the division of a diploid cell. And within your ovary, during the process of oogenesis, a mature haploid egg is called an ovum, and that develops. So you start back here. These are all your immature oocytes. So these are all the cells that are going to become eggs. You're actually born with all your oocytes. So males can produce sperm until they die. Females, you will stop producing eggs because you're going to run out of your egg supply. So your primary oocyte will then grow and become a secondary oocyte, and then once that oocyte matures, it becomes an ovum. You undergo ovulation, which is when your egg is released, and then the corpus luteum forms, which will then shed if nothing is fertilized. Okay, that is it for me for today. I do have an ed puzzle for you to watch, Crash Course Bio Reproductive System. If you have questions, please let me know. I miss you all. I hope that you are all doing well, and I will see you. Oh, nope, one more thing. Your IP. Your IP is reproductive IP number 1. There will be a reading. Yes. Okay. Bye, guys. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you later.